Okay, thank you everybody for coming tonight to our program. We are so pleased to provide free admission to our shows every third Thursday of every month, September through May, with a few exceptions. In December, we will be open in the main museum the night of the Christmas stroll, Friday, December 6th, where we will display nativity scenes for the public to look at. So if any of you have any nativity sets that you'd like to display for the night of the Christmas stroll, please call the Beaverhead County Museum as soon as possible. And on March 19th, it's a Wednesday night, the museum board will be teaming up with the Museum Association for the Beaverhead County Museum 75th anniversary. The location will be at the Lewis and Clark Room. There will be dinner, talks, a silent auction, and much more. More information to follow after the new year. As always, thank you for your donations. It's greatly appreciated. Directly after the film, we will open up the floor to the audience. We'd love to hear if you recognize anyone from these clips. So please hold your questions and comments for that segment of the program. Also join us after for cookies, coffees, and tea. Cookies provided by Lynn Giles. She has been working very hard, not only on these cookies, but on the Museum Association. So thank you so much, Lynn, you're appreciated. And candy. And Candy, welcome back from your much-deserved vacation. We missed your valued leadership while you were away. Aloha. On behalf of Beaverhead County Museum Board of Trustees, we are honored to host Ed Mooney and his grandfather, Louis Schmittroth's 1930 black and white films. This was a very fun project working with new people. Jim McIsaac's knowledge on Dylan's places and locations is the best you can get. And Ed, his Dylan roots go back all the way to Beaverhead County's beginnings. Ed's great-grandfather, Louis Stahl, moved to Montana in 1888. He settled just 4 miles from Argenta. He owned some mining claims and built 2 log cabins on that location. He moved one of them to Bannock, where he lived for a few years with his family. And in 1904, he purchased land in Dillon known as the Dutch Flats. It stretched from Dakota Streets to the foothills and from the college to Thompson Avenue. He also ran the Stahl Dairy. There are still some remnants of the dairy standing at the far end of Cornell Street, including these beautiful rock fence posts. Louis later became a judge and held that position until his death. From what I've read about Judge Stahl, he was generous, kind. In the summer, he allowed children to run free in the Dutch Flats and fly kites where there was no electrical wires, and to warm up with a fire and hot cocoa on a winter day after sledding on the foothills surrounding his dairy. Louis and his wife Julia had 9 children. The youngest, born in Bannock, was named Esther. In 1920, Esther Stahl married Louis Schmittroth. Louis Stahl and Louis Schmittroth bought the city bakery in 1921, later changing the name to the Schmittroth Bakery. It ran until the 1940s. The bakery was located at 120 North Montana Street. A tattoo shop is there now. I remember the building as Lackner Hardware. Louis Schmittroth was an amateur movie photographer. We were able to find many newspaper articles that help us link people and places to his films. Louis and Esther had 3 children, Louis, Merle, and Esther. Esther married Francis Mooney in 1946. Francis is the son of Dillon Sheriff in the 1920s, Dan Mooney. He was undersheriff until appointed sheriff after Sheriff Wyman was shot and killed by Yike, resulting in the famous hanging that occurred on the courthouse lawn. Dan was head of that party and captured Yike down in Monida. Dan moved from Montana with his family in 1893 and homesteaded at Ryan's Canyon. He married his wife Lucy, and they had 4 children, Francis, Earl, Daniel, and Catherine. After he became sheriff, he moved his family into the living quarters that were located in the courthouse. Esther and Francis Mooney's children Ed, Francis Ann, better known as Annie, and Peggy still live in Dillon. So, without further ado, I introduce Louis Schmittroth's 1930s films.
I'm Ed Mooney, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about the filmography that you're about to see, where it came from and how it ended up that we were able to project it here today. Before that, though, I'd like to thank the museum for the opportunity to share these films with you, and also everyone that has worked on the project. I've learned things that I never would have been able to find or know with Morgan's and Chrissy's research and the help of others. So thank you guys. And I thank you for coming. To begin, the original 16 millimeter films were taken in the early 30s, like it says there. And at the end of the Roaring 20s, or shortly after the Roaring 20s, that followed World War I. But before the Great Depression, there's kind of a window there apparently that people really let loose. The reels were digitized by Jack Stonell. At the time he was a faculty member in the film and photography department at MSU. And he also restored some of the film, and some of it was lost. It was unretrievable. But in 2002, he took those reels and projected them onto the screen, and then captured it to VHS tape by filming the screen. So we went along with that. Of course, technology moved forward. And in 2012, he was able to capture it directly from a projector that digitized and sent the digital version of it directly without projecting it up on a screen and doing it that way. And he put the reels on DVDs. So once we had them on DVDs, then we were able to convert the format, retrieve the reels from the DVDs, and convert the format to a standard video format that you'll see tonight. Morgan is going to project for us while we talk. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you've got we can gather some other memories that I can capture along with the films. Thank you. Oh, that's right. It's still me. So, that's my great-grandmother, so, and that's my mother. She's jumping into my grandfather's arms. And then they take turns. That's Merle, her older sister. And then Louis was kind of the ham. He's in there too, doing things that he shouldn't be doing probably. So those were the three kids. It's not all family stuff. Tried to cut most of that out. We have some of those swimming suits for sale. Anybody recognize that? Yeah. That's Louis. Uncle Louis. And Merle and Mom. And that's my grandmother and great grandmother. That's the kid. There's Louis again.
Elkhorn Hot Springs was originated in the 1880s. It had a crude bathhouse and a few log cabins. In 1890, the original plunge was finished, and a year later, a new bathhouse. Traveling there was difficult in the 1890s, and oftentimes roads were impassable. Hoping to improve the roads, an idea was presented to Congress to designate the area as a national park to be known as Elkhorn National Park, and to be as well known as Yellowstone. By 1905, the U.S. federal lands sold rights to Sam Engelgard, and he made some improvements. In 1918, Frank Felt owned the springs, making major changes. A new plunge was to be on the opposite side of the pool house. Chris Olson, a local contractor, secured the bid and built the new plunge that is the present-day pool. It wasn't until 1922 that a new highway was proposed as Elkhorn Hot Springs Wise River Highway. This would allow Butte and Anaconda to utilize the springs. A private hunting retreat was built in 1924 by local ranchers. This is the current lodge. The pool house was remodeled in the 1940s after it was struck by lightning. And Bernal Cause saved the lodge and several cabins after being condemned in the 1980s by completely remodeling but leaving its rustic charm. Elkhorn's therapeutic healing has compelled patrons for over 130 years, and it was voted in the United States the best healing waters of 1920.
Lovell Lake is a warm water fed spring located approximately 10 miles south of Dillon. A popular recreation spot since the early 1900s, Lovell's Lake is named after the original homesteader of the area, Philip Lovell. By the late 1880s, Philip and his wife were joined by Philip's nephews, who would live and work on the ranch for many years and continue it on. The lake has been used for a variety of needs, from irrigation and livestock to providing power. The plan was put forth by the former governor, B.F. White, whose hopes was that it could power both the new flouring mill to be built and the city's lights. It was estimated the power to provide from the waterfall at Lovell Lake to be around 140 horsepower, and the cost of the construction for the machinery to transmit the power to be no less than $20,000. This remained a popular recreation spot through into the 60s. Until vandalism and property damage took over, and eventually signs started to be posted of no trespassing. It wasn't until the mid-70s that until the 70s, when finally the Selkirk Ranch owned the property and officially closed it to all public access. I do believe you can go out there still if you get permission, but it's by permission only, and that's pretty much it.
I would interject that the building on the end here was the Beaverhead Lumber Company, and that building was moved out to Hall Road by Steve Logan. That's where Chance Bernal's office is now. It's an interesting thing to reminisce about.
Here is the C.E. Blend House at 289 Schuler Lane. Ray and Faye Nelson owned it for years after, and they raised their children here. And it remained in their family until the early 2000s. And this house is still standing. And we didn't recognize anybody from these videos.
I didn't. Maybe somebody up there.
In the early 1930s, Dillon had 3 active fox farms. The first started in 1927, close to the present-day golf course. It was ran by Ray Forrester and A.T. Peterson, calling it the Beaverhead Fox Farm. In the later years, Roy Forrester added chinchillas to his farm. They made quite a profit for him. Mary Mahler and her husband, Dr. Mahler, owned the Riverside Fox Farm just north of the River Bridge on the Old Butte Road. The Superior Fox Farm, which you see here in these films, was opened in 1928 by C.E. Blinn and H.L. Hatton. The farm stretched from the Old Butte Road to Lackner Lane, north of Schuler Lane. The house in the clip before is the house on this fox farm, faces Schuler Lane. The outbuildings were built before the 1930s and the Blinn house shortly after. H.L. Hatton was listed with Louis Schmittroth in the Dillon Tribune under entertaining together. Hatton originally moved to Dillon in 1927, where he supervised the construction for the Beaverhead Fox Farm for Forrester and Peterson. And then he partnered up with Blinn to form the Blinn and Hatton Fur Farms, later changed to Superior. Between the 3 fox farms in the 30s, they produced over $120,000 in pelts, with their combined 500 foxes, 70 pins per farm, and over 1,000 pups born in just that 1 year. If you look in this part, you can see the rubies. So that's kind of, and Lackner Lane would be out that way. And then you'll see coming up over here, McCartney Mountain. It is kind of hard to see. Shortly after the 3 farms showed their big revenue, 7 more fox farms opened. And their success was good through the 1930s. But the demand for fox furs declined during the Second World War. The fox farms waited patiently to see if the market would rebound, but instead, that all 10 fox farms were out of business by 1948. There you can see the rubies again. And I lived in the pelt house in the early 2000s. My bedroom still had those cabinets. The door is still there. The upstairs was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 400 square foot apartment. And when I first saw these black and white videos, I knew that this place looked familiar.
Here you will see two separate teams. The first is thought to be the high school team, the second, the normal college team. My estimation is most likely these are the 1931-1932 season. This takes place in the old Montana State Normal College gym. It sits directly behind the row house if you're looking at the college from Atlantic Street. The gym has since been converted to the Business and Technology building. This was still used as locker rooms, and there was a pool when I was a kid. Since then, it's now offices and the DFAC for the church. In 1929, BCHS hired Rick Breeden to coach all athletics. He was freshly graduated from Montana State College, where he had been part of the National Golden Bobcats basketball team. In 1931, he was hired by the normal college in addition to the high school. He would coach in Dillon through 1933, when he would then be hired back by Montana State to coach their basketball program. Rick Breeden would take the Dillon Beavers to earn a district championship in 1931. Members of that team included C. Gilbert, A. Stevens, B. Boone, Captain V. Kerr, R. Thompson, L. English, J. Stahl, Duke Gilbert, C. O'Brien, A. Gilbert, Vandergriff, Kent, Rowe, Brundage, and Bill Bates. By 1933, some of these same young men would continue to play for Breeden at the normal college. The normal college team that year was managers James Short and W. Boger, players B. Stroud, J. Smith, D. Gilbert, R. Lewis, J. Melton, R. Hoover, D. Taft, R. Osborne, C. Baker, J. Hickey, R. Thompson, G. Anderson, B. Bates, F. Vandergriff, E. Rouse, and S. Callahan. Our best guess is that due to one of the stalls perhaps being in one of these videos doing basketball is probably why Lewis went and did some filming. Breeden took both teams into quite successful seasons before he left.
Three classic Indian battles in the United States have very similar histories. They are, in order, the Battle of Washita, which happened in Oklahoma in 1868, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, which happened over by Hardin, south of Billings, June 25th of 1876. And the last one was the Wounded Knee Massacre. December 29th of 1890. The Wounded Knee Massacre, also known as the Battle of Wounded Knee, was the deadliest mass shooting in American history. I think that's fascinating. Nearly 300 Lakota, which are Sioux, people were shot and killed by soldiers of the United States Army on December 29th, 1890. And that's near Wounded Knee on the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The massacre occurred following a botched attempt to disarm the Lakota camp. All of the battles are a sad commentary, both of our government and the men who were involved in them, especially the officers who led the cavalry into battle.
Many Indian and whites were involved, and many died on both sides, especially the number of women and children. And examples of that would be Washita and Wounded Knee. Let's look at the two battles which did not occur in our area of Montana, but yes, their purpose was very similar: to punish the Indians who, in the opinion of the United States government, were not going to conform and settle on reservations. Lieutenant Colonel George Custer led the cavalry which attacked peaceful Chief Black Kettle's camp the cold winter morning, 27th of November, 1868. The Cheyenne camp was the most isolated band of a major winter encampment along the river of numerous Native American tribal bands, and they totaled thousands of people. Custer's forces attacked the village because scouts had found it by tracking the trail of an Indian party that had raided white settlers and had taken off from Quebec into this camp. The cavalry had 21 officers and men killed and 13 wounded at Washita. They estimated the Indians had perhaps 50 killed, women and children primarily, and as many wounded. The exact numbers on both sides are only an educated guess. June 25th of 1876, I think, is one that most of us will recognize. That's the date of the Custer Battle. And that was the next in the Indian battles that got our soldiers mired in more killing history. The morning of June 25th, General George Armstrong Custer divided his forces into three groups to attack the Sioux and Cheyenne camps on the Greasy Grass, or today called the Little Bighorn River. Custer's Crow and Arapaho scouts tried to warn him about the huge encampments, from which they could sense from a high spot called the Crow's Nest, which is about 20 miles also east of the Custer battle site, and close to the small Indian village, today called Busby. Of course, Custer did not believe the scouts, and stated several times that his 7th Cavalry could lick anyone, anytime, and any place. Well, it wasn't long until he was proved wrong. In fact, so wrong that over 212 cavalrymen died with him. Women and children, along with warriors, were killed by the early assault of the village. However, the actual count of Indian people killed is not known. The last of the Indian battles of this type we had happened not too far from here. It's called the Battle of the Big Hole. The date was August 9th and 10th. Civilians and soldiers from Missoula attacked the sleeping and peaceful camp of Chief Joseph. There were many casualties on both sides, both women and children from the Indian side. The Nez Perce slipped out under cover of darkness and headed for the safety of the grandmother, the Queen of England and Canada. The Battle of the Bear Paw was finally fought near Chinook in 1877. The Nez Perce were fleeing the U.S. Army troops, first toward their Crow allies. They didn't want a thing to do with them because they were too dangerous, and then toward refuge in Canada. The Battle of the Bear Paw took place on October 5th, 1877, at the Bear Paw battlefield, only 40 miles short of the Canadian border, near Chinook. They thought they were safe, but in reality, 40 miles to go. The Nez Perce laid down arms at this location, and supposedly this is where Chief Joseph's famous quote was spoken here: "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." One interesting sidelight, which I neglected to put in here, a lot of the people that were in the Battle of the Big Hole came from Missoula. A lot of the Army people and also civilians, they asked a lot of civilians to go and kind of back them up. And on Higgins Avenue Bridge, if you've been in Missoula, that particular bridge, I'm sure it's still there. But the town put a chain across there just in case the Indians would come and attack them. I thought that was kind of interesting. Thank you.
I was able to find proof in the Dillon Tribune that on a Sunday afternoon, Louis Schmittroth went out to the local ski hill, which was by the golf course, which looks to me like it was out by Lovell's Lake. And they were definitely courageous, were they not? And there is the Schmittroth bakery truck. And you're never going to believe it, but the Dillon town had a plow, and they used it, and it was fantastic. You can see the Elios Brothers building. If Morgan pauses it just right, there's the Louis Schmittroth bakery. Louis Schmittroth must be across the street at Dillon Implement filming at this moment. And now he's across the street filming Dillon Implement. There's the depot. And we're on the corner of Bannock and Idaho. You can see the DI building.
Karnes Basin is located just west of Kelly Reservoir in the Pioneer Mountains. Briefly here you will see both Bali Peak and Alturas Peak. This is Bali, the view from the basin. And then there's Alturas, the ridgeline from Alturas 2, there's Alturas 2 there. During a conversation that Christy had with Ms. Schaefer-Carpito, we were told that the Schmittroths had a cabin just past Argenta. Along with some of Christy's research, sort of the Stalls had cabins up in the area, and they also had done some mining. My guess is these were both located near the Karnes Basin, and probably Karnes Basin was just a good place to go do some winter recreation and skiing, so looks like they had quite a fun time up there. These bits of footage are all a few different trips, it looked like, from the Big Hole River. Most of them appear to be from the Maiden Rock all the way down through Glen to Notch Bottom is mostly what it looks like they were canoeing. Here, I believe this is the Maiden Rock picnic area. Getting ready to put in. I, for one, would never be brave enough to do the big hole in a canoe.
At least they have life jackets.
We got helmets on in that one.
And you go canoeing in your suit.
Gentleman's sport. This clip here, you'll see, this is Maiden Rock.
There's Louis again.
We're hoping that somebody recognizes this beautiful home.
I don't think so.
OSHA approved.
It should have been. Or could have been.
Where is that, Chrissy?
We're thinking still up in the Argenta area.
Okay.
In August of 1931, Louis Schmittroth and Roy Forrester headed down the Salmon River in a canoe. Their story spread quickly, and an article was published by George Baker that was later featured in Film and Stream magazine in 1934. In the story George wrote about their trip, Louis had this to say about the start of their journey. The story titled "Down the Salmon River." Against the advice of old-timers, two men paddled down this river of no return in a canoe. We had a 21-foot canoe cut at the back for use of an outboard motor. It had a wide beam and built-in sponsors. We rigged it with a high, tight-fitting canvas arched across, leaving an opening for each of us to sit. We made a test run of 40 miles from Salmon City to Chute, where the river enters the gorge. From the start, we noticed a different feel of the river than the Big Hole, Madison, or Beaverhead, which we were used to. There were long stretches of white water, and we were on alert the whole way. Bargemen assured us that the narrow confines of the gorge of the river was 10 times worse. We later agreed with them. They would go on to make the almost week-long voyage through the gorge. Louis and Roy were avid canoeists. Both raced and recreated and enjoyed their time on any river. In 1931, Louis and Roy competed in a race on the Salmon, a 6-mile race on the Salmon. Louis and his teammate would take first, completing the race in 43 minutes. Roy and his companion would take third. Roy's companion in this race was the only other man known at the time to have successfully canoed the River of No Return. His name was Reverend George McDougall.
And we do have extensive footage of the journey down there too. It was produced, the film was made and titled and everything professionally, but we didn't think it necessarily fit here.
Another night. Brown's Lake Resort. Joseph A. Brown came to Montana in 1862 for mining. In 1870, he built a toll bridge over the Big Hole River near Melrose. He homesteaded and was a stock grower at that point. In 1872, he married Agnes and they had 4 children, one of them being Mae Brown Hagenbarth, Jim Hagenbarth's grandmother. General Brown found 2 beautiful mountain lakes above his toll bridge on Rock Creek drainage. The beautiful reflection from the sun gave him the idea of a resort. In 1893, he started building boat ramps and boathouses and later a boarding and dining hall at the lower lake called Brown's Lake. The other lodge was at Lake Agnes, 1,000 feet higher than the lower lake. The lake was named after his wife. The trail was very steep between the 2 lakes, so Joseph built covered rest stops for visitors to take a break on that difficult terrain. When you reach the lake, the beauty is rewarding and well worth the hike. In 1896, General Brown planted 1,500 rainbow trout in Lake Agnes. The largest he claimed to catch up there was over 10 pounds. Butte aristocrats came for their summer vacations, William Clark being one of the most frequent visitors of the lodge. To get to Brown's Lake Resort, you would take the train to Brown Station, then by horse and buggy to the Lake Lodge. General Brown died in 1906, leaving the lodge to his son Joseph that was living there at the ranch. The opening of 1911, the Dillon Tribune read, "Good road for autos. $2.50 a day or $15 a week." In 1919, Joseph sold the resort to Hughes, McCaleb, Hartwick, and Gimbel. It included 73 acres, mostly water, numerous cabins, a boarding and dining hall, several steel round-bottom ramps, and rowboats. The plans were to run the lodge the same as the Browns. The last newspaper article of Brown's Lake Resort that I could find was in the mid-1930s. I am uncertain when and why it closed. There is concrete that you can still see in Brown's Lake today, but it is said to be that of a dam that gave way.
The Elks Lodge at this time was one of the bigger lodges in the area. I was told that in the 20s and 30s they had over 600 people. Isn't that something? I don't even think they have 200 today, do they? I know it's way down. Anyway, Dillon Elks hosted the state convention in Dillon in 1933. The convention was 3 days long and featured a variety of events, including multiple parades, each led by a different Elks group. The convention was kicked off by gunfire of the Grand Exalted Ruler that year from Seattle, and over 1,000 others expected to attend.
Being an old man, I have a memory, and it's usually correct. I prided myself for many years. I used to say I could recite the chain of title on a third of the property in Dillon. Surprisingly, it was pretty accurate, but so having been around for so long, Ed Mooney and I worked together at Robert's Foods about 59 years ago. Lee Graves and I used to pal around when we were in college, so I'm pleased to be associated with these old gentlemen. Ed asked me to sort of identify some of the things on this movie as far as time goes in football game and where it was. And our point is right now, this is where the library was built in 39, I believe, at the campus, was sitting where this field is. Now, Atlantic Street would be right about here. This house here, and this is what brings me to where it is the house at 919 South Pacific Street, which is owned by, Dancer. That house, according to the public records, was built in 1917. But the house directly across the street from it, which isn't built yet, was Spence Hagstad's house, 924 South Pacific. And that, public records indicate that was built in 1917, but I don't believe that's the case because it doesn't exist in this film. To the left, right here, is where Lloyd and Annabelle Doherty lived. And their house was built in 1920. The place we see right here was the Elio house, which Dan and Bobby Scott had for many years. And that's on Washington Street. Where I live is right over here, and that wasn't built until 1925, although the rest of the houses in the 800 block on South Atlantic Street were built in 1920. But thinking of Hagstad's house probably sits around here, and then on the Atlantic Street was the Straw House. The townhouses were all here. Prior to that, remembering it was the vet hospital was there. So this sort of gives you a perception of where they were playing football way back then. Okay, this is Louis Schmittroth here. This is at 121 South Washington Street, which was built in 1915. The big house right here is the house that the Rowe family owned and then became the Centennial Inn at one time. Note this fence here. This fence is still here today, and we'll have another couple of pictures and see us going down the street. The house at 121 South Washington Street was bought by Smithrow in 1930 from somebody by the name of McGraver and Palmer. See, here's Pacific Street here. The house that was Burt McGuire's was right here, and then this house is still here in the corner here. It's that Foster House. Thinking back here was the Mariana, or the Bagley School. Note that, see, that fence is still here today. But the house, after Smithrow sold the house, they sold it eventually became Lauren Davis's house, and Lauren was the father of Dorothy Ann Forrester and Carl Davis and Bill Davis, and also I believe his stepfather, maybe to Buzzy Davis. Sold that in that house after the Davises died. Dorothy Ann Forrester inherited it, and then it was sold to Robert Rhodes, who was the there's the Burt McGuire house. Here's our subject house again. Who was the father of Leanne Forrester.
There's Louis again.
Okay, yeah. And I think if you go by there, that same storm door is still on the front of that house. So those are some of my notes on some of the local property there, and found it quite fascinating. And of course, to know the history of it was even more fun.
You're the bashful one, so I'll go ahead and do it. This is the Beaverhead Hospital, right?
We found out today that the Beaverhead Hospital was built, put together about 1928, and it lasted till when, 78, thereabouts? Don't have those dates down exactly, but it was quite a while. Many of you born in Dillon, I'm sure, like myself, born at Beaverhead Hospital, and it's got a lot of history. That was a neat old building. It was quite a picturesque one too. I don't know what they did when they tore it down. They might have put another temporary hospital in there. Huh? Well, the clinic was okay. But anyway, that's about all we have. Ed was saying that his uncle did the landscaping up there at the hospital. Anything else? Okay.
Found out in the papers that Louis Smithrow was the commander of the American Legion, and he was the commander to make sure that everything was done right for this landscaping.
There were about 300 people there, too, for doing that. Did you recognize anybody? It's probably There's Louis.
When they tore down the clinic, they did build a little plaque. And it's out of the brick from this building. So it sits there on the corner. Mhm. Right at the corner of the clinic there.
Is this me? Yeah, these are some then and now pictures of the Fox Farm area, and you can see, we're telling you that this was the house on Schuler Lane. Luckily, the leaves were off, and you can see it there. When we were trying to locate where some of the clips from the film, these were captured from the film, where they were taken from. We believe these are the rubies here, and that's the rubies from Highway 41. So we're looking toward the Fox Farm, where the Fox Farm was here, I believe. And then these were the houses, a couple of houses that Jim had focused on, and didn't quite figure that out, right? And then this was you, Jim. Did you want to talk about a couple of the other houses?
No, that's okay.
Oh, okay.
I think I covered it.
Okay. Well, go ahead then. Yeah. So these are before and after too. Didn't have one in the films of the house on Washington Street, where we captured the fence and the door here in one of the frames, and then this is how it looks now. And then if you look in this one, this is whose house it is?
It was Forsyth,
Forsyth.
and then it was the Centennial Inn.
Yeah, Forsyth and then Centennial Inn. Yeah. And then you can see this is what caught my eye to begin with, was this interesting roof line, and it's still right there. You can recognize these houses from the 1930s. And then of course right here is maybe the best one, looking south down Washington Street, and that's the house next door to this one here.
The one in between, that Burt McGuire house, the one with the awning,
Yeah,
was the Burt McGuire.
the one with the awning. Did you? Burt McGuire. Yeah. So you can see part of this one and then the one down the street there. And that's the gate into the Washington Street house. So you can see the fence that Jim was talking about.
And then this would be the 1931 district champion team. On the left here is Coach Breeden. On the right of the photo is Captain Kerr. In this photo you have Duke Gilbert, C. Gilbert, A. Stevens, B. Boone, R. Thompson, L. English, J. Stahl, A. Gilbert, Vandergrift, Kent, Rowe, Brundage, Bill Bates, and the coach in the far back.
What year was this?
This is the 1931 district.
31.
And then this would be the backside of the gymnasium building up at Western. I do believe the fire escape actually might still be on there. And then to the right of that is the 1932 and the 1933 team below it. They gained quite the crew, having some of those BCHS graduates join the team at Normal College.
And now is that segment of the program where we'd like to hear from you. So Morgan has another mic. If anybody has any comments or recognized anybody in the videos, we can pull it back to any part of the video.